We're right about the quarter mark of the fantasy football season, and we're starting to form some new opinions about players based on what they've done so far. And I think a lot of those opinions are right. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you need to go out and buy Kyle Pitts today. I was high on him before the season. Sometimes we're wrong. We just have to adjust. But there are some spots where I think the dynasty market is either overreacting or underreacting to what we've seen so far this season. And that's really what I want to attack today. My name is Paul. This is Pure Potential. And we are going to be talking about the biggest buys in dynasty fantasy football following NFL Week 4. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe, comment, leave a like. Let's get into it. Now, before I get into specific players today, just a word of caution. If you've been dealing with injuries, your lineup's feeling a little bit thin, your first thought when you go out to acquire another player is to try to trade away your 2025 first round pick. And I would just say, pump the brakes for a second. Let's think about this. While I definitely think it's okay to trade away your first in certain situations, I have found that most managers are just not nearly picky enough about the return that they're getting. And it's been a while since we've had a good elaborate analogy to just really over explain something in Dynasty. So I've got one for you today. There's this comic that I used to read as a kid called Calvin and Hobbes. Hopefully you've heard of it. If not, your childhood was just a little bit worse than mine. But Calvin and Hobbes, great comic, top tier, highly recommend it to anyone and everyone. So in this particular comic strip, the main kid, Calvin, pulls a snowball out of the freezer that he's been saving since winter. And it's like the middle of summer now. So his diabolical plan is to go outside and hit his neighbor Susie with the snowball because she'll never see it coming. But he goes outside, he sneaks up on her, and he just completely whiffs, airballs the throw, smashes into the sidewalk, plan ruined. Your future first is like that snowball from Calvin and Hobbes, okay? You've only got one shot. You got one chance to trade this thing, so you better not miss. There are a lot of first round trades that work on paper, right? Value wise, the trade calculator will say that it's fair. Like if you trade your future first for Mike Evans and Joe Mixon, that's gonna come up as fair on whatever trade calculator you wanna use. But I'm just never making that trade because first of all, you have a ton of downside risk there. Right? You have someone like Mixon who's already dealt with an injury this year. He's an older running back on a second contract. You have Mike Evans who's in his 30s at wide receiver. There's just a ton of age risk and you're not guaranteed to actually get difference making production from either of those players. So I'm just not making that trade. And then second, you've lost the opportunity to package that pick up for a premium asset. Right? Maybe you package it together with some other players and you really upgrade. You know, you go out and you get a Jamar Chase or you go out and buy, a Malik Neighbors before he became the best wide receiver to own in Dynasty. But the point is, when you're trading your first, you have to think about the opportunity cost of what other deals could come along. You don't want to just go out and make the first trade that comes your way because you think it's good value on paper. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the players. And most of these guys I'm going to talk about today are what you would consider buy lows. They're guys that I think are undervalued right now in the market, but this is still going to vary from league to league. So don't be surprised if the prices I'm throwing out, maybe they don't work in your league. But what you don't want to do is try and force a trade with that stubborn manager and end up overpaying. Because the point of these players that I'm going to talk about is that you're actually able to get them at a discount in a lot of cases. And the first one on the list, I have to start with one of my guys. Look, I threw in the towel on Kyle Pitts. I'm not throwing in the towel yet on Garrett Wilson. Maybe you don't want to go down this road with me. That's fine. I understand. It's been a long and lonely road with Garrett Wilson. I'm hoping that we're nearing the end of it. But in week 4, it was more of the same, right? He finished with 5 catches for 41 yards. It was disappointing. But he got the Patrick Surtain treatment, genuinely one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, one of those few guys that I think does make a difference in matchups, especially when you're in an offense like the Jets that's just not very inventive, not very good at getting their best players in mismatches, getting them in space. So yeah, Garrett Wilson, he was kind of in Siberia on Sunday against Patrick Surtain. I know that it's been brutal so far. Trust me, I know better than anybody how bad it's been. I just still believe in the talent. I think the talent's there, and I just don't have any other logical reason for why Garrett Wilson won't come through with some big fantasy performances sooner than later, right? And some other things we got to consider. Number one, Aaron Rodgers still looks good. He didn't look good in week 4, but generally this season, he has looked good. And that matters for the pass catchers there. Wilson still has a 25% target share on the season. That was even higher before he played against Patrick Surtain. So he's still earning volume at a pretty high level, relative to other wide receivers in the league. And then this stat actually feels fake, but according to the Fantasy Points data suite, the Jets actually rank number 1 in neutral script pass rate through the first 4 weeks. So when they're in a close game, they're not forced into throwing because they're way behind, or they're not deliberately running because they're way ahead. But in neutral situations, they're actually opting to pass at a very high rate. And this does kind of make sense with the way Rodgers likes to play. He does play slow. He likes to take up the clock, make adjustments, find the guy he wants to throw to, but he also does like to be in control of the game. And because of that, Garrett Wilson is actually top 10 in routes run at the position. Now, you can choose to take that as a negative thing, like he's run all these routes and he still hasn't scored any points, or you can just be like me and you can cope and you can say he's running all these routes. Eventually, that's going to translate to fantasy points. And that is truly what I believe. Okay, this isn't me having take lock. I do believe that. I don't think it's necessarily the exact same quality of bet as it was at the beginning of the year, but he has games coming up against the Vikings, the Bills, the Texans, the Cardinals, the Colts, the Seahawks over the next 6 weeks. That should lead to some more favorable outcomes for Garrett Wilson. Now, I want to look at some trades here, and I'm going to pull these from the Fantasy Calc database. I think this is a really useful resource just to see what guys are going for in real leagues. There's tons of variance here because some leagues are full of absolute morons who make really bad trades, but you might be in a league like that. I don't know. So I just pulled the most recent deals. Definitely recommend going over there and checking them out yourself if you want to see more. But these are all super flex leagues, typical, PPR, half PPR scoring, start 10, start 12, that kind of thing. These are some deals that I found, and I think a lot of these are super palatable, right? You have Garrett Wilson for a single 2025 first. You get Garrett Wilson and a first for Bijan Robinson. That seems pretty favorable to me. Joe Mixon and Deebo Samuel for Garrett Wilson and Chuba Hubbard. Love that. So a lot of these trades are very doable in my opinion. And I think you can get him at a discount because managers are frustrated with him. Okay, the next guy on my list is Anthony Richardson. And I know this one's not going to feel good either, but that's why there's a potential discount here. And you do need to get a discount. I am not buying him at his week 1 price. There is obviously more risk in the equation now that we've seen him play some pretty bad games. In week 2 and week 3, there was a lot of negative stuff. There is risk there that's not to be ignored. But at the same time, I know there are people that are just panic selling, that are like, it's over for this guy. It's never going to happen. I'm getting him off my roster for whatever I can get. But let's think about this for a second. Okay, in week 4, Anthony Richardson led a touchdown drive right off the bat. He gets the ball back. He's on his way to score again before he gets hurt and knocked out of the game. Then Flacco comes in, they score on that drive. Offense doesn't do a whole lot the rest of the game, but Flacco is the one who gets credited with the win. He's not losing his job to Joe Flacco. Okay, the injury was minor. He's coming back probably this week, and there are still flashes from him, right? We know that the upside is there as a rusher. He has a huge arm. He has a ton of fantasy upside if Steichen can just find a way to build this offense around his strengths. And at the very least, there should be potential for a short-term value increase when he comes back into the game, when he inevitably does have a big spike week, and there should be another sell window later this season. So even if you're not fully bought in, even if you don't think he's a long-term success in the league, I still think that this is a spot where so many managers are just freaking out about Anthony Richardson. It's just good due diligence to go out and see if you can get him, for a ridiculously cheap price. And on that note, just look at these trades from today. We have Anthony Richardson for basically Saquon Barkley straight up. Anthony Richardson for Christian McCaffrey straight up. Anthony Richardson and a second for Justin Fields. I mean, these are all super flex leagues that these trades are getting done. I'm taking Richardson in all of these. Richardson and a first for Jaden Daniels. I wouldn't take that one. I'll take the Daniels side there. Richardson, Achane, and a first for Patrick Mahomes. That's pretty tempting to me. Waddle and Richardson for Jordan Love. That's pretty tempting to me. So most of these deals, I'm taking the Richardson side. And I don't know, maybe that's a risk tolerance thing. Maybe I can handle that more than a lot of managers can. But when people are going to sell at a discount that is just not proportionate to what we've seen so far, I'm going to jump on that every time. All right, I've got a few more wide receivers for you to buy before we get into the running back position. And one of these guys is Brian Thomas. He's really the only player on this list I would categorize as a buy high. But I think we got to get ahead of this one. His value is definitely higher this week than it was last week. And it's higher last week than it was the week before. But I just don't think he's as pricey now as he's going to be. Right. So this is kind of a fake buy high. I'm buying him at his current market value because I don't want to miss out when he's worth even more in a couple of weeks. So go out and make an aggressive offer while there's still potentially a window open. Because so far on the season through 4 games, despite the Jaguars offense being pretty dysfunctional, he has 2.48 yards per route run on the season. That's elite. Okay, that's an elite number for a rookie wide receiver, or really any wide receiver. But his week 4 performance was absolutely ridiculous. 35% of his routes he was targeted on, over 3 yards per out run in that game. And then you can look at this chart from Football Insights that I'll put on the screen. It's got on the x-axis first downs per out run, really predictive metric that Ryan Heath has written a lot about on fantasy points. And then you have yards per game on the y-axis. First of all, you can see Malik Neighbors in the corner, just absolute menace. But you can see Brian Thomas too in a really good spot, right near Chris Olave, Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas. He is in the part of the chart you want to be on. And again, I think this is a superstar trajectory for Brian Thomas. I don't think he's going to match Malik Neighbors. I'm not saying he's better than Marvin Harrison, but right now I view him as the 3rd best wide receiver in this class. And I would actually go out and send a first plus for Thomas. You know, we talked about be careful about trading your first. This is the type of guy that I'm willing to trade my first for. I'm not saying that's my first option. I'd rather trade old players. I'd rather go trade, you know, Chris Godwin in a second or whatever. But if that's what it takes, that's what I'll do. And looking at these deals for Brian Thomas, you know, right at the top, Brian Thomas for Tyreek Hill, that's an easy choice for me. Man, in any league, any format, any situation, I'm taking Brian Thomas. I'll take him over Drake London as well. Brian Thomas and a first for Jahmyr Gibbs. That's easy for me as well. Brian Thomas for Brian Robinson. What are we even doing here? Easily Brian Thomas. So these deals are out there. Brian Thomas and a second for Deebo Samuel. I mean, these deals are just ridiculous. I'm not seeing them in my leagues. People are being very cagey about Brian Thomas in my leagues, but clearly these deals are out there, and I think you need to go take advantage right now. And then next we'll hit on Jaylen Waddle. And the thing about Jaylen Waddle is the dynasty market can really only handle one bad thing happening to a player. When 2 bad things happen, it kind of just breaks the collective brain of the dynasty market. All logic is just thrown out the window. And I think that's what we have with Jaylen Waddle, because in 2023, his points per game decreased from 2022 to 2023. He dealt with multiple injuries during the season. He left several games early. And that led to the season end numbers not looking quite as good for Jaylen Waddle. And then this season, has actually a pretty good first game, but then Tua goes out, the offense falls to pieces, totally dysfunctional. So we obviously have this production dip from Jaylen Waddle. So you have these 2 bad things that happen. But here's the thing. In 2023, Jaylen Waddle was actually better than he was in 2022. It just wasn't showing up in the stat sheet because he kept dealing with these injuries. He was playing partial games, but he had a career high targets per out run, 27%, and he had a career high yards per out run, 2.63. Again, absolutely elite numbers. His per route stuff was fantastic in 2023, and that's because he is extremely good. Even when he is sharing the field with Tyreek Hill, he is an extremely good wide receiver, bordering on elite wide receiver. And that doesn't even include any kind of contingent value of what could happen if Tyreek Hill were to miss time, or if Tyreek Hill's age were to catch up to him, right? Eventually, Tyreek Hill is going to lose the battle to Father Time. And at that point, Jaylen Waddle is on a long-term contract in Miami. He figures to be the top option in that offense. It's not like they'll just bring in someone else that will take on the Tyreek Hill role. There are not guys that can do that just, you know, out on the streets. So I think Waddle's in a great spot now. I think he's in a spot that could even potentially improve later. And recent reports are that Tua is symptom-free. He should be back this season, possibly by week 8. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, there's no injury risk for him again. Doesn't mean that there's no risk to this offense at all, but I'm buying into talented players, and his value has cratered. I bought him myself in a league last week. I traded Godwin and Mixon for Waddle and Singletary. And to me, I mean, that's just a huge win, you know, based on what his value was just a few weeks ago. I don't think that should change. I don't think that should be wildly different just because we've seen a couple of weeks without Tua. But that's not the only good trade, okay? There are other good deals out here. Right? I'm not saying I would take every single one of these, but Waddle and a first for Jordan Mason and Zay Flowers, easily taking that. Waddle and a first for Nico Collins. I mean, that's pretty fair. That's pretty even both ways. Jaylen Waddle for T. Higgins, basically straight up. I'm taking Waddle, even though I like Higgins. He's coming up, spoiler alert. But still, I'm taking Waddle there. Jaylen Waddle for Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb. I mean, these are easy deals. You're getting down here at the bottom, you're getting a plus on Waddle for DK Metcalf. Waddle in a second. That's just so easy for me to take him. I'm not going to be a prisoner of the moment. Just because Tyler Huntley is playing quarterback right now does not mean that Jaylen Waddle suddenly sucks at wide receiver. He has always been good since his rookie season. And yeah, I mean, some of these just blow my mind. But go out and send an offer, because I promise you can withstand a few bad weeks from Jaylen Waddle when you have his entire career in front of you. And then I have one more wide receiver. I already mentioned him, T. Higgins. He is another victim of the 2 bad things theory, although instead of 2, it's more like 6 bad things because he just keeps missing time. Plenty of people have labeled Higgins as injury prone. People are staying away from him because they think he can't stay on the field. I typically shy away from that label. I'm not one to call players injury prone outside of the most extreme of cases, right? I remember when Saquon Barkley was injury prone and now he's not. And I remember when Christian McCaffrey was injury prone and then he wasn't and now he's injured again. But these things come and go. It's very fluky. There's a lot of variance in it. And I'm not knocking Higgins significantly for missing time the past couple of seasons. But the problem with T. Higgins is that he came back from being injured, missing the first 2 games, and then he's played 2 games since then, and he only has 9 catches for 99 yards, 0 touchdowns. Womp womp, time to move him down the rankings, right? Well, let's hold on a second, because according to expected points per game from the Fantasy Points data suite, T. Higgins is the wide receiver 5 in expected points per game in the games he's played this year. He has 17.8 expected points per game. His usage has been extremely bullish. He's gotten a ton of targets where he just caught the ball like barely out of bounds. He's making these circus catches that aren't counting. Eventually, some of those are going to land in bounds. Eventually, some of those are going to be in the end zone, right? He actually has a higher first read target percentage this season than Jamar Chase. Not that I think he's the one, not that I think he's better than Chase, but he is a focal point of the offense, and it just doesn't seem like it yet because it hasn't hit in a big way. Regression's going to come, and the Bengals are very, very pass heavy. So you have a good quarterback, you have a pass heavy offense, and you have this concentrated target tree between Chase and Higgins. I think he's a very good buy right now. I think he's probably worth a little bit more than a late first, but I think you can get him without trading a first. I think he's the kind of guy you can trade productive veteran players for, because people don't feel like they're losing anything by sending him away because he's not scoring right now. So just to illustrate my point, here's the trade market right now for T. Higgins. The top one, we have Higgins for Addison straight up. I'm taking Higgins there. I understand why people like Jordan Addison, but I mean, really, he scored 2 touchdowns last week. What did he have? Two catches? That was a little bit fluky in my opinion. But you have these other deals, right? Jordan Whittington in a second for T. Higgins. I mean, that's easy to me. T. Higgins and 2 seconds for Isaiah Pacheco. I don't even know what's going on there. At the very bottom of this screenshot here, you have T. Higgins straight up for Braylon Allen. Those are easy deals to accept. And those are the types of deals I think you can look for in your leagues. All right, let's close this thing out with the running back position. Now, I think it's kind of pointless to just prescribe one running back as a buy because it's so dependent on the team that rosters that running back. Like teams right now that are 4-0, 3-1, they don't want to hear about it if you want to buy their running back. Outside of extraordinary circumstances, maybe they have like ridiculous depth, they're just going to tell you to go away because they need their running backs. In their mind, those guys are just untouchable. But if you go to the 0-4, 1-3 teams in your league, they're going to be a lot more willing to listen to offers because they're already on the verge of blowing it up. Their season's almost over. They probably know it. So go to those managers and just send offers for their running backs. Like there are a ton of guys right now that have really good roles that are all gettable in Dynasty. Aaron Jones, James Conner, Brian Robinson, Tony Pollard, David Montgomery. All of these guys are super useful. You can plug them in your RB2 spot. They have touchdown upside. They have reception upside. I would not call these running backs league winners per se, but they're definitely really useful players. So like I said, go to those teams that are struggling, go see what running backs they have and try to pry those running backs away. You don't have to be that picky with these RB2 type guys that are in good roles. But the one running back I'll advise as kind of a universal buy in Dynasty, and this is because he's not helping anybody right now. So contender, rebuilder, doesn't matter. They might not be too attached to Jaylen Warren. I would be shooting out offers for Jaylen Warren. Last season, he showed us that he is an incredibly talented running back. He ranked 3rd in rushing yards over expected per attempt, according to Next Gen Stats. He was 2nd in missed tackles forced per attempt among all running backs with 50 plus carries. That's according to the Fantasy Points data suite. And perhaps most importantly, even more important than him being an incredibly elusive runner who can consistently generate positive plays, he was 5th in running back target share last year, sharing the backfield with Najee Harris. Now, after this season, Najee Harris is an unrestricted free agent. Warren is a restricted free agent because he was a UDFA. Now, I think they're really unlikely to pay both of these guys. I don't think both of these running backs are going to be in Pittsburgh next year. So Warren has the potential to lead a backfield. He could either stay in Pittsburgh as their lead back, maybe they add another guy in the draft, or he can leave, maybe he can become a 1A somewhere else, similar to Tony Pollard, who was efficient in Dallas, ends up leaving in free agency. Now he's the primary back in Tennessee. His value on Fantasy Calc right now is ridiculously low. He is the 165th overall player. He is ranked behind DeAndre Hopkins. He is behind Hollywood Brown somehow. He's just ahead of Tyler Algier, Andre Yoshivas, Jalen McMillan. This is a prime trade target, in my opinion, because I'm just going to buy the talent and I'm going to let the situation sort itself out. Oh, and I'm not going to talk about Drake May because I've talked about him too much already on this channel, but go buy Drake May. And while you're at it, go buy JJ McCarthy too, because I'm starting to see this ridiculous conversation that the Vikings are going to pay Sam Darnold and he's going to be the quarterback and they're going to keep McCarthy on the bench. I really don't think that that's going to happen. The Vikings drafted McCarthy in the first round. They bring in Sam Darnold. They know where Sam Darnold came from. They know how bad he's been his whole career. The key here is that the system is one of the most quarterback-friendly systems in the league. And certainly I think the coaches in Minnesota know that. So if they're faced with the option of giving Sam Darnold, I don't know, $35 million a year, or just letting JJ McCarthy slot in, who can probably do all the same things that Sam Darnold is doing right now, I really think they're going to go with McCarthy. I'm really not factoring in any risk that Sam Darnold is the long-term starter for the for the Vikings. That was a little Trey Lance, Brock Purdy callback there. I didn't mean to say 49ers. I don't think they're going to pay Sam Darnold. I really don't. If he plays well enough all year that's even a conversation, some other team is going to make him their franchise quarterback. And they'll probably regret it unless they're running the same type of McVay, Shanahan style of offense. But anyway, I think McCarthy's a good buy too. That's going to be it for today's video, guys. As always, thanks so much for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. We hit 3,000 subscribers last week. That's amazing. I really appreciate you guys, that you enjoy the content, that you come back each and every week to just listen to me talk about this game. If you are one of the 65% of viewers that's not subscribed, maybe you could consider changing that this week. Maybe hit the button down below if you like what I have to say. And if you want even more Dynasty content from me, you do have the option of becoming a YouTube member. The join button should be down there under the video or on my channel. I offer Dynasty rankings, my top 200 or so. I update it every single week with trade value tiers, really helpful for constructing trade offers. I do weekly live streams just for the YouTube members. I break down their Dynasty teams. I go over content that doesn't get into these videos. It's a good time, but I'll be back soon with another Dynasty video. Hope I'll see you then.